So let's get into the propagandists. This one's a little too personal for me. I've been harping on this for a minute, but I want to make this very concise for you guys so you can understand what's going on in Australia. I have these series of tweets that break down what's happening in Australia very simply. I said, don't forget, if the chief minister says you can't leave your home even to get food, thanks the army for their trucks used to transport COVID suspects, and you get arrested if you try to leave the camp, Jesse Singal and Quillette say it's a conspiracy theory. So here we go. Here's one article. Under that lockdown, residents could only leave home for 5 reasons, including essential shopping, essential work, providing or receiving care, exercise, and obtaining medical treatment. Gunner has announced Binjari and Rockhole residents now cannot leave their homes unless for medical reasons or in an emergency. That means you can't leave for food. We have this from Grabian. Chief Minister Gunner. The army is now transferring positive COVID cases and contacts in Northern Territory, Australia, to quarantine camps by army trucks. And finally, NT police arrest 3 people who escaped from Howard Springs COVID quarantine facility. The propaganda and those supporting the state narrative in this regard is probably the scariest thing to me, because what ended up happening today was Jesse Singal wrote this entirely fabricated story about me, claiming that I was like a conspiracy theorist or something, based on my tweets literally quoting abc.net.au, which is to say 38 people were transported by army truck to the quarantine facilities. I never said with guns drawn or by force or anything like that. He then writes this big article that's completely fake, seemingly just to kind of discredit me. Now, of course, I know that's personal, and I take emotional issue with it. But I decided to put together these 3 sources, which I included the links to all of these stories on Twitter. And surprise, surprise, many people didn't know this was real. So a lot of people engaging in the Twitter spat I had with Jesse see these 3 stories, and their response immediately was, no way that's real. Because if you read these propaganda stories from like Quillette or Jesse, you'd think I made it up. When in fact, it's all NewsGuard certified sources. In Australia, they have police and military setting up checkpoints and locking down people in their homes. The chief minister has said, you cannot leave your home for these reasons, for the normal lockdown reasons, meaning no food. He then said, I'd like to thank the prime minister for the ADF personnel and army trucks to transport the COVID cases and the suspected cases and close contacts to the Howard Springs facility. All of that was said from his mouth.
I feel like Quillette is kind of going the way of the mainstream media, which is a little bit troubling. And I think it's a really good reminder that we need to be incredibly critical of all of our sources, even if we think that they're mostly or some percentage in agreement with us ideologically.
It's also pretty terrifying what's happening in Australia, where the government previously disarmed the citizenry. Very interestingly, no one's really bringing up how gun confiscation worked really well in Australia anymore. I remember hearing about that a few months ago. I don't hear about that right now.
Look. Ain't nobody in Australia would take up arms against what's going on.
Probably, right, but still, I think it's a factor worth considering here. But when it came to these 3 escapees, I remember seeing a news report showing how police officers were closing down roads and inspecting every single vehicle, searching everyone's cars to make sure that no one was hiding, trying to make these people get away from the larger area. So they caught these people. But this is again absolutely huge powers that the government is granting itself in the name of a tragedy that of course has historically gone down with people exploiting really bad events for their own personal powers. And the powers that they have in Australia, I mean, the authorities there have rushed through laws that give them the ability to control people's social media accounts, to hack their accounts, to see everything that they're doing, to deny them the ability to be able to walk into businesses, heavy fines for not wearing a mask, heavy fines for going to protests, jail time for people organizing protests. And when you're seeing human rights eviscerated to such extent where you can't even voice an opinion against the government without having the government knocking on your door saying, we want to control your social media, we now have the ability to post as you when we want, we have the ability to know every little detail about your life. That is a dangerous power that you have given the government that, of course, it routinely, historically, always abuses.
I want to give a special shout out to Quillette and to Jesse Singal too, because if there's one thing they accomplished in making up fake stories about me or lying, is that they've just gotten me to cover the issue in greater detail more and more.
I love it.
So, I mean, it was initially, I tweeted concentration camp in reference to Howard Springs as kind of like a jokey, trolly thing. And Claire decided to go nuts on it. So I doubled down. And now we're at the point where I've covered this in great detail and it's only getting worse. Now there's manhunts for people who are escaping from this quarantine facility.
Yeah. Seems nice.
And Jesse decides to write a completely fabricated narrative about me based on a tweet without doing any research. That's the funniest thing about it. And in turn, I obviously get mad about it. And then we cover the story in greater detail, once again, simplifying that in Australia, they are rounding people up with the assistance of the military, and the chief minister is thanking them for the assistance, sending them to a camp where they're trying to escape.
Is Claire in Australia right now? Claire
Yes, she
Lydia?
is.
So
Yep.
is she in a position now where she got online and was like, "You're right, Tim. What the government's doing here is horrible. We need to do it." Would that they'd come knocking on her door?
Yep, probably.
Yeah, of course. Wow. I mean, there's incredible videos showing police officers showing up at people's doors, banging, demanding, saying, "Did you post this on the internet? Were you here at this protest? Did you dare have a voice against the state?" Intimidating people, harassing people, not just protesters, journalists. Like what's his name? Yemi. I forgot it. I forgot.
yeah.
how to
Hami?
put-
Oh.
Avi.
Avi.
Avi's been doing really incredible work. He had police show up at his door. He's routinely detained for even trying to report on these protests as an official member of the press. So when you have intimidation of journalism, when you have the suppression of people's voices, when you have the suppression of protests, when you have the suppressions of people's speech, you have a situation that is absolutely Orwellian, destructive, dangerous, and the opposite of anything progressive that anyone could even imagine.
You want to know what the best part is about these 3 people who escaped? They were teenagers and they had tested negative. The Australian government
Why were they there?
took 3 teenagers from the Binjari community, brought them to a quarantine facility when they were negative for COVID, tested them, they were negative, and then when these 3 teens escaped, the police were sent out to investigate, hunt them down, and arrest them.
Set up roadblocks.
Wait, so
set up
yes.
roadblocks.
No,
They
no,
stopped every
why
single
are
car.
they there though? If they're negative,
Yeah.
They were
That's a
near
camp.
someone.
I have to wonder about the Australian government bringing not people without COVID to a quarantine camp where they're not allowed to leave. And then you have to imagine these teenagers are probably thinking, I don't want to get COVID.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're negative. And they're like, good, let me go. No.
wait, were they positive maybe first and then they were negative?
So it's possible. But the minister said close contacts. So that means like,
Right, okay.
well, we got, my brother's downstairs. You are officially a close contact. They'd come to your house and arrest you and be like, well, you were a close contact with this person. You might be like, I didn't see that person. I don't know what you're talking about. Too bad. The best part about it is how they say they're not doing it by force. And now you have all of these, I swear, look, people need to understand. It's a known fact that governments use sock puppetry on social media. The bot accounts. I'm not saying every person's a bot, but they do this. And it's funny to see the propagandists coming out and tweeting, it's been confirmed the people are not being taken by force. And I'm like, are you kidding? Then why are they escaping? Like they're voluntarily showing up and then trying to break out? That makes literally no sense. More importantly, they voluntarily show up but can't voluntarily leave. How about we'll just call it that? Okay, the Australian government is offering free rides in army trucks to the quarantine facility where people aren't allowed to leave by threat of arrest. Is that it? Are we good now?
Do you think it's
Sounds
possible
nice.
they just don't tell them that they can't leave once they get there? And are they maybe misleading
That's
them?
definitely possible.
trying
I
to figure out
think
what's
it
going
is
on.
completely unreasonable to make the argument that when the minister comes out and says you can't leave your house to eat, and we're going to take people by army truck to quarantine facilities where they will be arrested if they escape, the idea that they were voluntarily going to this place is absurd.
You know what I don't like is the way the Australian police interact with the citizenry, like gorillas attacking like a wounded lamb. Like they just walk up on people, no fear, like their arms are out, like they're about to grapple. So like they're not afraid of getting shot in the chest because they've disarmed the populace, and they just like stumble towards humans and like use their mask to like squeeze them. It's disgusting.
One question I have about the Australian camps is: are vaccinated people able to get into these camps? Do they detain those people too?
Yeah, probably for sure.
That
If they
test
tested
negative?
positive.
Yeah, or if they're a suspected
sorry,
case.
or
So
near it.
Okay.
one of the big things too, and we'll get into this in just a second, is that there's new travel restrictions where Biden wants to implement them. That no matter your vaccination status, if you travel into the country, you've got to quarantine for a week. You've got to have a negative test before traveling, and all of these like, I don't know what's the word for the zealots. All of these like hardcore government mandate zealots are like, what do you mean I've got to take a test in quarantine? I'm double vaxxed. And one guy tweeted like, I'm double vaxxed and boosted. I refuse to be treated like these dewormer people. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Bro, get your subscription now. Promo code FauciOuchie to your monthly vaccine booster. Like, I think if people are concerned about their health, you go and talk to a doctor about it. I think COVID is very, very serious. I got it, and boy, was it bad. But I think the problem is they keep trying to centralize everything. They keep trying to say, we have an idea. This one thing will solve the problem, when in reality, it's going to be a multifaceted approach that solves this.
It's not polio. This Jim Cramer guy acted like it's polio, like we're dealing with polio, and then he was like, so. He said, polio is horrible. Polio is horrible. So we need to use vaccines against COVID. Like complete non sequitur, irrelevance.
Also, other vaccines for polio and smallpox, they took years to get mandated.
Wasn't it 15 plus years?
Some were like 5 or 6 years. Others were like 15 years, but never before has it been right away as it has been with COVID.
Oh, so they didn't rush out a vaccine for
No.
smallpox.
And
years.
there's also the
Years.
danger of rushing something that will have an effect that, of course, will stop the natural progression of a virus and potentially even make it worse. That's what some scientists are speculating right
Brett
now,
says a lot.
that this intervention could actually cause to a worse situation, another different variant that could hurt the world even more, which if you're thinking about how the state has been using this problem to help their friends to conduct the largest transfer of wealth in recorded human history, to empower themselves with godlike authority over the population, I would think that they would have an interest in making this situation worse, personally myself, but that is just my own perspective, my own personal opinion. Some scientists are speculating this as well, but again, the data, the science, it's still all coming in. It still really hasn't been figured out, but to jump to conclusions, to say we need authoritarianism, we need tyranny to solve this problem is absolutely ridiculous. It's a stupid idea, and it's an idea that Joe Rogan argued recently is hurting more people than actually helping more people. And I think that argument has a lot of merit to it.
Yeah, I'm still surprised how many people say that the vaccines are a way to end the pandemic, that they stop the spread of COVID. Like, so many people still say that. It's like, no, it's mainstream science that's not the case. That it slows the spread temporarily. That's the most accurate way to say it.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.